Thanks so much, Scott. I'm super excited to talk to everyone. I feel like everyone's paid their dues over the last 2 days, and so now they get that delicious dessert that you've been waiting for. And it's funny that everyone wants me to change my name to Retail Geek. My mom and my wife are both lobbying for me to change my last name to something else. So interesting perspective there. But enough about me. Today we're going to talk about some of the lessons we've learned over the first 3 months of COVID, and maybe a few thoughts for the future as we continue to evolve commerce in this like highly dynamic landscape. So let's jump right into it. So let's turn to COVID. The way I like to think about COVID is really not something that dramatically changed consumer behavior and created all new behaviors, but rather a time machine that propelled us all 5 years in the future in about 5 minutes. And I'm going to give you some examples of why I see it that way. So in the highly unlikely event that any of you don't get enough of me in the next 20 minutes, the great news is there's like 300 more hours of me on the interweb. So my good friend Scott Wingle and I record this weekly podcast, cleverly called the Jason and Scot Show. It has horrible SEO because Scott's parents spelled his name wrong. They spelled it with only one T. But we have had many of the speakers from this week's event as guests on the podcast, including Scott, who's been a multi-time guest. So if in the event you want to hear more of these kinds of conversations, they're available on the podcast at any time. But enough about that. Let's talk about COVID and the impact it's having on retail and commerce. And the way I like to think about COVID's impact is not really that it dramatically changed consumer behavior and invented all new behaviors. Rather, it dramatically accelerated a bunch of trends that we were already seeing in the marketplace. So I like to think of COVID as a time machine that propelled us 5 years into the future in about 5 minutes. And I'm going to give you a few examples of why I see it that way. COVID has accelerated a lot of new consumer behaviors, primarily as a result of us all being forced to shelter in place. I have broken those down into 6 big buckets, and we're going to walk through them. So the first one is the transition to digital shopping. This is hopefully pretty obvious to everyone in this webinar, but depending on how you define retail, before COVID, Forrester felt that about 16% of all retail happened online. That's excluding gas and automobiles. In the first month of COVID, where we started to shelter in place, that jumped up to about 16% of all sales were online. And now in April, May, it's like 25 to 28% of all sales are online. If you take out food and gas, over 30% of all retail sales are online right now. So we've had this dramatic shift to digital. And more important even than where people are buying things is where people are making buying decisions. So before COVID, Forrester had this interesting metric called digitally influenced sales. And they essentially said, hey, 17% of all sales are online, but another 36% of sales are digitally influenced, meaning you use Google Maps to find a store, you used Amazon to read ratings and reviews, you use a manufacturer's website to see ingredients, you used all these digital tools to help you make that purchase decision. So 36% influence plus 17% online meant that a little over half of all purchase decisions in the US, which is about $3.7 trillion of sales a year, were digitally influenced. And now, as a result of COVID and that online percentage being higher and the digitally influenced percentage being higher, over 70% of all consumer spending is now influenced by all the digital touch points that all of you in the audience influence for your brands every single day. And so the big takeaway from this slide is we're all wildly underpaid, and digital is certainly the future. You may have noticed the CEO spending a lot more time in your office than he or she did a little while ago. And this is, of course, why. And a lot of the leaders in our industry have recognized this as well. Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, says that COVID has accelerated digital demand at Target's business at least 3 years. The chief digital officer at L'Oreal talked about they're now preparing for a world in which half of all their sales are online, 80% of all their touch points are digitally influenced. So even much bigger penetration than we talked about in general. And Nike, in their recent earnings call, said that they're now expecting a business where 50% of their sales are direct online sales to Nike. That's about 30% that they're at today. So that's a significant shift for them. And essentially, we're moving to this digital first world for commerce, which is something we all predicted, but it's now happening much faster than any of us foresaw. A lot of new digital shoppers' first experience wasn't so awesome. And this even impacted the best operators in the world. So, Amazon, half of their sales is a marketplace. So they have third-party sellers. When you buy something from a third-party seller, you get a chance to review that seller and say how good the experience was. And on average, about 94% of marketplace sales have favorable reviews. And you can see once COVID kicked in, 94% dropped down immediately to 87%. They had a 7% drop in customer satisfaction directly as a result of COVID, because even Amazon wasn't able to keep up with delivery promises. They were having supply chain challenges. And, really, we had lots of new customers into the space, but not the world's greatest experience. And the other challenge we had is it really put a strain on margins. So Andy Dunn, the founder of Bonobos, has this great quote I use: e-commerce is awesome as long as you don't care about EBITDA. And that's particularly true in some of these categories like grocery, where we jumped from 3% to 12% penetration, but that we probably lost a lot of money on all those digital sales. And you think about it, if you're a retailer like Walmart and you sold some general merchandise online and some groceries online, the groceries were less profitable. And because of COVID, the mix shifted dramatically from general merchandise to grocery. So you shifted to this less profitable mix. You were delivering all those products versus in-store pickup. And so that you had a more expensive channel where you lost margin. Another thing that we'll explore a little bit more is customers tended to shift to larger pack sizes, which had incremental costs associated with them. And of course, every retailer had to pay a lot of bonuses to their labor in their warehouses and their stores. They had to pay for extra cleaning precautions, extra equipment. And so while we had this nice spike in digital demand, we had huge strains on our unit economics and our profitability as a result. So total mixed bag around the shift to digital. At the same time, we had some significant impacts in the brands that customers choose and brand loyalty. Before COVID, you might have been a really loyal Charmin shopper that exclusively bought Charmin toilet paper. During COVID, you were thrilled to just get any toilet paper. So if a retailer did what we call forced substitution and sent you their store brand of toilet paper instead of Charmin, you were happy to try the store brand of toilet paper. And many customers that were forced into these trials ended up adopting the new brand. I know there's a lot of talk about how great artificial intelligence is in retail, and we all have these artificial intelligence recommendation engines. I'd like to point out that they were not perfectly awesome at these substitutions when we had all these strains on our supply chain. So this is kind of my wall of fame. There's a customer at Walmart that tried to order some yogurt, and instead they got Christmas ornaments. There was a customer at Kroger that tried to order crunchy peanut butter, and they got glue sticks, which at least they're both sticky, so maybe that made some sense. And then my favorite is there was a customer that ordered from Tesco in the UK, and they were trying to order baby wipes, and instead they got Bell's whiskey, which I imagine those new parents might have been okay with that substitution. We'll never know. But in many cases, when those customers were forced to substitute brands, they actually adopted the new brand permanently. So we had a lot of brand promiscuity and people changing brands and trying new brands more so than we would traditionally see. At the same time, we saw a new kind of brand loyalty. People were particularly gravitating to traditional comfort brands, right? And so you have Miller Coors talking about how all the demand shifted from their microbrews and their sort of premium products to what they call dad beer, those core brands like Miller and Coors. Prior to COVID, you wouldn't eat any food that had any artificial colors or flavors. During COVID, you want Kraft macaroni and cheese and Campbell's soup. You went back to all these comfort foods. and so you had this kind of dichotomy where you were less loyal to your traditional brands, and you shifted to these popular products that maybe were a little less in favor, right? You bought cleaning products before, you wanted organic cleaning products with no quote unquote chemicals in them. I always chuckle at that because I think water is a chemical technically. But in the middle of COVID, you wanted the good Clorox bleach. Like, you did not want the organic green cleaning products, right? So a related behavior we saw is what I call pantry stocking. And obviously the first version of this was the hoarding, where people were buying a lifetime supply of toilet paper. And at first you might think that was great news for the toilet paper companies. It actually wasn't, because they essentially, customers aren't using more toilet paper than they ever had before. They just bought a year's supply in advance. And so what that meant is the toilet paper companies sold a year's supply of toilet paper in the least profitable way imaginable. And now their comp sales are going to stink because everybody's got a house full of toilet paper, and they're not going to buy more for a year. And so this is creating an interesting behavior, marketing change I'll talk about in a minute. But as the pandemic progressed, the purchase pattern shifted from those irrational stock ups to more rational stock ups. Customers wanted to fill their pantry with shelf-stable products. So the most popular products in COVID were dry pasta, canned foods, evaporated milk, things you could put in your pantry to guard against potential supply chain shortages or inaccessibility of grocery stores. And so all these brands sold bigger than usual quantities of products, but consumers aren't consuming those products at bigger than usual rates. And so now you have a bunch of brands that are thinking about marketing campaigns, not to get you to buy more, but to use what you already have, right? So reminding you of the cool arts and craft projects you can do with your kids with a Kraft mac and cheese, reminding you about the great dips you can make with those Campbell's soup. And I'm proposing that the toilet paper companies really lean into Halloween and convince kids to toilet paper a lot of houses to help families work their way through their inventories of excess toilet paper. And we're literally seeing this in the economics of companies. So when Chewy did their earnings this quarter, they talked about $90 million in incremental sales that they got from the so-called COVID cohort of people that were buying bigger sizes and stocking up more than they did before. And in Chewy's case, they believe that that's a permanent shift in behavior, and that they're going to keep selling the larger bags of dog food. So this brings us to our fourth behavior, which I call nesting. This is all the things that we're forced to do at home and the new behaviors we adopt as a result. So before COVID, you got about 60% of your calories from the grocery store, 40% from restaurants. Right now, you're getting over 90% of your calories from the grocery store. And obviously, as things open up, restaurants hope to get back those customers, but the grocery stores hope to never give back that customer, right? And they know they're not going to keep 90% of your stomach, but they hope that they're maybe going to keep 70% instead of the pre-COVID 60% level. And so they're doing all kinds of marketing to lock in those new behaviors. Did you learn how to cook during COVID? Did you buy cookware? Did you buy an Instapot? Well, let's keep making stuff. Let's keep eating at home. On the last day of work, before you sheltered in place, you stopped at Best Buy on your way home from work and you bought a monitor for your home office and you ordered a comfy chair for your home office. When your office opens back up and you feel safe going to your office, you may still want to use that home office more often. Your employer bought a license for Zoom and a VPN. So you may not commute to work as often as you used to. And a lot of commerce is tied to that commute. If you're McDonald's or Starbucks, you rely on customers going to work to stop there on their way for breakfast. If you're a gas station, you rely on customers using that gas to get to work. If you're a convenience store, you rely on customers stopping at that gas station next to the convenience store. So there's a whole cascading effect that happens because people now have more tools and competencies to work at home. If you bought a Peloton bike, as millions of people did during COVID, you're less likely to renew your gym membership when this is over. If you were in market for a new mattress during COVID, you only you had in your consideration set companies that could deliver mattresses to home. And now you're out of market for the next 7 years. So if you're a brick and mortar mattress retailer, you missed a whole cohort of demand as a result of COVID. And of course, we all learned how to give ourselves haircuts and do our own nails and give ourselves pedicures. And if you were a woman that bought some equipment to do that, maybe you bought a UV light to set the gels on your nails, you may go to the salon less often, even when the salon is available to you. So all these nesting behaviors, the companies that won business as a result of nesting are now marketing to lock that nesting in and keep as much of that business as they can and not revert to pre-COVID levels. So you sort of have an interesting battle there. This next one is about health. And before COVID, when I talk to retailers, I always talk to them about when that customer parked in their parking lot and got out, the last thought going through that customer's head before they walked into your store was, are they going to have the item I want at the price I want, right? And so that was, something that we were addressing with retailers. Today, when a customer visits a retail store, the most important thought on their mind before they walk in that store is, will this visit kill me? Will this be the visit that gets me sick and causes me to have a bad outcome, right? And so retailers are all fighting on this new dimension of making stores feel safe for customers. And we're seeing all kinds of changes in behavior as a result of customers not feeling safe. Customers are using ATMs 32% less because they don't want to touch those public keypads and those public amenities. Customers aren't using customer affinity programs. They're not willing to type their phone number into the scary pin pad at Jewel. And we're now seeing retailers invent new experiences. 7-Eleven is rolling out pay with your voice so that customers can fill gas at a 7-Eleven and not have to touch the pin pad on the gas terminal. Some gas stations are bringing back full service gas because customers don't want to touch the pump. There used to be all kinds of amenities in the store, like food samples, salad bars, bulk sales. Now all those things are going away, and entrepreneurial new companies are inventing new ways to provide some of those amenities. So we now have robotic salad machines that make a salad on demand and deliver it in a sealed container to you to replace the salad bars that grocery stores used to have. We used to drive customers to the fitting room in apparel stores because we felt if they tried on the clothes that they were more likely to buy them. There's a cognitive bias called the endowment effect that kicks in when you try on the clothes and you're reticent to give them back. Now nobody wants to use the dressing rooms, and so retailers are inventing new ways to do fitment. We're using a backscatter radar to measure customers and let them put the clothes on a virtual mannequin of themselves as a way to do fitment for customers that don't feel safe using a dressing room. And we're inventing totally new contactless ways to deliver our service. At a Boutique Jenny's ice cream, you're shopping for flavors on a menu board outside the store, ordering them on your mobile phone, and just going in the store to pick up your ice cream instead of the old world where you'd look at the ice cream in the store and try samples. There are now websites dedicated to rating the safety of different retailers, and there's some fear that consumers are going to pick retailers based on the safety practices that they've implemented. Do they force customers to wear a mask? Do employees have good compliance with wearing a mask? If they have one-way aisles, do the employees follow the one-way aisle rules, right? And usually by this point of all these trends, I've really depressed a lot of my audiences and I'm highlighting all these negative things that are happening. So I like to throw in one favorable trend to kind of wrap up this section. And that's that every pet in America has been adopted. So if you're a lover of animals, good news. The overwhelming majority of all animals now have a happy new home. They're getting to spend a lot of time with their new owners. And obviously, this is a little bit of a joke, but this is another interesting commerce opportunity. We just created the largest new cohort of pet owners in the history of the United States of America. Chewy estimates that 1.6 million new pet owners were born as a result of COVID. And what's interesting about all those pet owners is they all learned to get their food and their cat litter and all their pet amenities digitally instead of going to a PetSmart or a Petco like they might have in the previous world. So we've born these new digital consumers in some cases. And of course, we saw a huge uptick in adoption of online pet sales from 22% to 31%. So wrap all this up and you say, what does the future of retail look like? And the answer is nobody knows. Doug McMillan, who's a lot smarter retailer than I am, he's the CEO of Walmart. He's fond of saying it's going to be a bumpy road. There's going to be a lot of starts and stops. We don't know when the true health risks of COVID will abate. We don't know when the psychological ramifications will abate. And we don't know how long the economic implications might linger beyond the health or psychological implications. So there's a lot of unknowns. all retailers are having to adopt this practice that I call scenario planning, where they prepare for a wide variety of different eventualities. But a couple of things I'm going to leave you with that we know are changing. It's going to be a long time before retailers are allowed or feel safe letting as many customers in their store as they used to. A busy Costco might get 3,000 customers an hour on a weekend. They're not going to let 3,000 customers in that store right now. It just isn't safe, and customers wouldn't feel safe. A huge department store like Harrods in the UK could get 80,000 customers in a day. Now it's taking them more like a month to get 80,000 customers. So no retailer is going to be able to make comps or have a good revenue if they're exclusively relying on selling to people that walk in the store. So they're all primarily focused on selling to people that don't walk in the store and getting the people that do walk in the store to buy more and get out more quickly than they used to, right? So this obviously leads to curbside pickup as being a primary tool that retailers are adopting. Adobe said that curbside pickup has been up almost 200%. In the pandemic. We've seen Google roll out new curbside pickup features in Google Shopping. Best Buy very impressively deployed curbside pickup in 800 stores in 48 hours. So we're seeing the future, at least for the next 18 months, is retailers really leaning into these digital ordering and curbside pickup in a ton of categories. And one of the interesting ramifications of customers not wanting to go to stores as much and not feeling safe in stores is that customers are doing fewer store trips and they're buying more stuff at each store. And what that means is they're picking different stores. If you were a customer that got your organic produce from Whole Foods, you got your shelf-stable groceries from Kroger, and you got your alcohol from Total Wine, as I know Scott and Alan are big fans of their Total Wine liquor. In COVID, to minimize trips, you're buying all three of those items from Kroger because Kroger carries all three. And so these retailers that have the assortment that customers want are now winning. And we're seeing a lot of customers change their preferred retailer as a result of these dynamics. And so what this means is we're creating a place in which no existing customer is safe. You can't assume you're going to keep your existing customers, but where all of your competitors' customers are up for grabs, and you can win a bunch of new competitors if you can outperform you can win a bunch of new customers if you can outperform your competitors. So we're creating a winner-takes-all market where nothing's established. So the big takeaway from all of this is what got us here is not what's going to get us there. The retailers that survive and thrive in the post-COVID era are going to be the ones that are going to be able to put aside the playbook that they used through February of this year and invent a new playbook for this new set of behaviors and new circumstances that have emerged as a result of COVID. So to me, the four characteristics that are most going to define a successful retailer are going to be those that are able to truly behave digitally first. Over the last several years, we've all gotten good at talking about digital first. But in the heart of hearts of most CEOs, they still gravitated to their traditional retail metrics and their traditional brick and mortar performance. Now they're going to have to truly invest and behave as if digital is the most important part of their business and the front door of their store, because it truly is. Retailers are going to have to win on this new dimension of safety and trustworthiness. And historically, that wasn't a high priority for which retailer a consumer would choose. So this is a new dimension that we're going to compete on. It's going to be super important that you match your assortment to the needs of your customer and that you win on convenience. With all of these shopping trips up for grabs, retailers are really going to have to cater to this new set of expectations of consumers, because we really have a winner-take-all model for those retail visits. And ultimately, one of the most important attributes for retailers is going to be their ability to overcome innovators' dilemma. The retailers that are able to reinvent themselves and imagine that COVID put them out of business and that they started a new business on March of 2020 are going to be the ones that do the best. The retailers that are trying to subtly alter their plans from earlier this year, that are trying to adjust their budgets, that are trying to reprioritize their existing initiatives, they're really still stuck in the past. And those are the retailers that are least likely to survive and thrive as we go forward. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought, and I will look forward to seeing you all online, and please feel free to send me any feedback. Thank you.